Welcome to Your Family Dog, the podcast where we celebrate the special bond between families and their canine companions. Whether you're a parent, grandparent, considering bringing a furry friend into your family, this show is for you. Each episode, we dive into topics that matter: training tips, health advice, the newest research, heartwarming stories, and expert interviews, both canine and human. Our goal is helping families and dogs grow up together, one episode at a time. Thanks for joining us. Our guest today is Bob Dietz. He's a retired canine search and rescue specialist with FEMA and Texas Task Force One. He's well known for his work with his dog Kinsey at Ground Zero, and we thank Bob and Kinsey for their service. He and his wife, Karen Dietz, someone you've heard from on the podcast previously, are active dog trainers specializing in Scentwork, disaster response, and behavior modification. And they co-own Canine Connection LLC, a dog training and behavior consulting business that helps place and keep dogs in homes, as well as providing seminars on dog training topics. Today, we're going to talk to Bob about a new sport that he's in the process of creating that's good for every dog, not just high drive dogs. So, Bob, tell me about Geo-Scenting and what it is.
Well, Geo-Scenting is basically a activity that I created, started working on originally back in 2007. Started doing classes 2012, or probably earlier than that, 2011, maybe 10 even. Geo-Scenting is basically, if you think of geocaching, which is looking for a little hidden treasure that's you can find the coordinates on geocaching.com. And Geo-Scenting is where we actually put a scent. I'm using clove oil on that cache, and then training the dog, imprinting the dog on that clove oil odor so that they can go out and find the scented cache. Years and years ago, in fact, probably in 2007, I was at a dog scout camp, Dog Scouts of America, and I was teaching. And one of the badges that somebody else was teaching was a geocaching badge. So I had my live find dog Gracie with me. I had another dog prior to her named Kinsey, who was my partner at the World Trade Center. Kinsey,
And thank you
unfortunately.
so much for your service.
Oh, you bet.
I know that we are all, we are a grateful nation.
Well, I appreciate that. I really do.
There's not really words to convey. I have family that was working in the Empire State Building at the time. I had family who lived in the area. I had friends who were working in the World Trade Center, even though I live here in Georgia. And when I found out that you were one of the responders who went to do search and recovery, my heart broke for all of us, but I was so grateful that you were there and willing to sacrifice on our behalf.
Well, one of the biggest honors in my entire life was getting to put that American flag on. It was over my left breast on my BDU top. It was a great honor to get to serve. Kinsey was my canine partner at that time, and she had a really wonderful career up until January 7th, 2007, and she got killed in the line of duty. And one of the reasons why, well, I appreciate that. One of the reasons why I wanted to create this sport or activity, I'm not even going to call it a sport, an activity, is I wanted a activity where the dog could search for something, use its nose, but that was safe. I spent an entire career, 16 years, of putting my dogs in harm's way, and that was terrifying for me. I almost quit after Kinsey got killed, and had a call from a fellow handler out in Fairfax County, Virginia, one night about 2 o'clock in the morning. And she called me and said, "Hey, I heard that you were thinking about quitting. And if you do, she died for nothing." And she was right. And so I'm glad I didn't. I stayed on. But Gracie was my next dog. And she was with me in 2007 up through my retirement at the end of 2015, the beginning of 2016. And Gracie and I went to this dog scout camp. And I remember I went out looking for a geocache. And she had become a dog scout. We had gone through the process, and I'm out in the woods and I'm hunting through this geocache, and I find it and I get it and I start to log my name on it. And I look at her, and the look on her face is like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. It's like, where's little Timmy? She was like, this is stupid. Why are we doing this? Let's go find somebody. That's what I do, and so I thought about that. She was right. And so I thought, what if we were to put a scent on this cache, and you had the coordinates, and based on the level of your dog, if you had like a dog that was pretty new to the activity, you could get within 10 feet of it and let her find it. If you had a dog that was, a rock star and had maybe even been in competition in either NACSW or AKC, which wasn't even around then. AKC was, but not AKC, scent competition. But any of the other type of scent competitions, if you were a rock star in that, you could start from 10 or 15 acres away, and find it. And so I thought, man, this is so cool to do this. So I started taking a bunch of pet dog trainers. In fact, that same camp the year before, they had asked me to teach scent detection at the camp. And my wife and I, this was and I want to say it was about 2005. The first time I went to camp, this was before Kinsey had even gotten killed. I came home from a hurricane, still had sand on my boots, and I walked in, and Karen Deeds is my wife, Karen. She goes, "Guess what we're going to get to do?" And I go, "What are we going to get to do?" She goes, "We're going to get to teach at a dog scout camp." And I said, what's that?" And she goes, "Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Dog Scouts, you earn merit badges with your dog." And I told her, "That's the dumbest thing I ever heard of." And she goes, "No, come on, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. We're going to go to this resort up on Lake Texoma, and we'll be there for 3 or 4 days. And you only teach for like an hour a day. You can take your rod and reel and go fishing and everything." So I go, "Cool, let's do it."
Did she explain to you, like, there will be cake?
Oh yeah, basically. That's exactly what she did. And we were newlyweds, so I had not become wise yet to the beguiling activities of a wife.
Well,
So
and you did not marry like a dumb woman.
no, she totally just
Like,
hooked me and reeled me in.
So when Christopher and I started dating and he started telling his friends that he had a girlfriend, somebody
Yeah.
asked him, like, "Oh, what does she do for a living?" And he said, "She's a dog trainer." And they went, "Oh, right." And he goes, "No, no, no. She's a positive reinforcement based dog trainer." And they went,
I love it. I love it. So Karen talked me into going to this camp. And so about, I don't know, like 1, 2, 3 days before the camp or whatever, she goes, "Something's come up. I had to schedule some lessons. I'm not going to be able to go." So, yeah. So, oh yeah. Yeah. And it really wasn't intentional, but that's what happened. So I went to this camp teaching scent detection. I even took pseudo marijuana with me because we were training narcotics dogs at the time. And I thought, okay,
I also have
I didn't know. I'll teach them to
freezer.
go find, marijuana. So we go to this camp, and I start working with these pet dogs. I remember calling Karen after my first lesson, and I said, "Some of these dogs don't have air drive." It's like, this is not what I'm used to. I'm used to these high drive dogs that will, a helicopter lands and they'll drag me to it because that helicopter is the road to Six Flags. Most dogs would feel that prop wash and hear the noise and turn and run the other
Right.
direction. These dogs are tough as nails. They would look at a rubble pile. The World Trade Center was still on fire the whole time we were there. Literally, if we went in a hole, we'd take a bottle of water and pour it in the hole on some metal to see if it boiled, so we would know if they needed to spray water on it before we went in. And these dogs love that stuff. That's what they lived for. And so that's what I'm used to. So Karen goes, "You're going to be fine. Just pull everything out of your toolbox." And by that time, I was crossing over to the positive reinforcement based world. I had come from a pretty harsh world.
No, me too.
I did.
Me too.
I was not even balanced. I mean, I was a punishment based trainer prior to that, but Dog Scouts is all about positive reinforcement based training. So that's what I was going to do. So I pulled everything out and I came up with about 15 new things. And anyway, by the end of that, those 3 days, I had 12 people that could walk into a room, get within 2 feet of where source was, and tell me, where it was.
My dog found it.
It blew me away. And when I got home from like a deployment or a mission or something, Karen would say, "How was it?" And my response was always the same. "Oh, it went fine." I didn't want to talk about it. I really didn't want to talk about it. Or I might tell her something funny that happened back at the boo, or what we call the base of operations. I might tell her something funny that happened in the field, but I didn't get into the bad stuff. I just didn't want to talk about it. And I finished working with these pet dogs, and I called her on the way home. It was about an hour and a half away, and I talked to her all the way, describing every dog. "Oh my gosh, you should have seen this poodle. You should have seen this schnauzer. Oh man, that rat terrier that rat terrier just rocked
Came
it.
alive.
And you've seen the border collie. And there was this corgi that was like scared of a shadow when it came in, but it still was able to do it. And it blew me away. It changed me forever. It had such an impact. And so there's this series of things that happened where I said, I want to create an activity using scent detection that's safe. I knew what it felt like to have a dog get killed. I had two responsibilities as a handler. One was to get my dog into source odor, get my dog close where they could find source odor, and keep my dog safe. And I had failed on one of them. And it just, even though, I've come to grips with the fact that there's nothing I could have done differently. There's nothing that I did wrong, but it was my responsibility. And I'll always look at that. So that's how I came up with the idea for Geo-Scenting. That incident with Gracie in the woods where she was totally put out by the fact that I found something.
I'm glad you're having fun.
Yeah, and exactly, and she didn't get to. And thus it was born. So I had a core group of people, about 6 or 8 people in Texas, that used to meet with me every Saturday as we developed it, and it was so cool. We had so much fun doing this. We would meet every week. We would go to Starbucks, sit down at a table, and I would go through scent propagation and talk about how scent moved, in a wilderness environment and stuff like that. And then from there, we would go out and do imprinting, and then I would start doing puzzles. I'm huge on puzzles that a dog has to go through stuff. And there's a lot of puzzles. If you look up Geo-Scenting, Geo-Scenting, Geo-Scenting on YouTube, you'll see a bunch of puzzles that we're doing indoors, actually, but it's with pet dogs, and a lot of them didn't have a lot of drive. And we were able to get those dogs into eustress, that good type of stress that we love to train in, where the dog is just focused, and an old hunter that I talked to used to call it, that's the dog's want to. That's where they want to learn.
Right.
And so those puzzles are just huge in the development of it. I had a corgi that belonged to a client in Fort Worth, And Eli, the first time he worked outdoors and he got into odor, and we had it hidden in a tree that was coming up out of some tall grass. And Eli got to that tall grass, and he's like, "No, I don't want to do that." He didn't want to. Well, we used to call
Could
it
be a
busting
bug.
brush. Yeah, he didn't want to bust brush. So I set up these puzzles using a bunch of cones, and I would spread them out at first. The cones that are about yay high that you use for like
The little kid
soccer and
soccer
yeah,
cone.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I had those set up, spread out far enough where he could go between them. And then I slowly moved him into the point where he had to knock them over. And after he went through about 3 days of knocking over these cones to get to source, we took him out and he busted brush like a champ. It didn't bother him anymore because he could do it now. We worked him through that. And, I'm not going to take a dog that has, drive that's down to here and build that drive up way up here, but I can certainly take that drive and get it up to here.
Well,
And,
and I'm sure you and Karen both, that myself included, that there are dogs that are so high drive that are living in a pet dog home. That can be a really difficult mismatch.
They've got to have an outlet. They have to have an outlet. Yeah.
The average family who has, 2.3 kids going to 18 activities a week is like, nah, what do I do with this dog who's like climbing the walls because they need to, kind of like when we're obsessive. I mean, it's not an obsession, but I have to have something to do. Like, one of the meanest things you can ever do to me as a human is make me sit at a desk and do nothing. Like, please no. And I think that my experience is it's really easy to build drive. And some families get really into, we're going to build drive in this dog, but then they forget that also brings with it, attached to the bumper like tin cans, is that the dog needs to exercise that drive now that you built it.
Well, and here's the other part. Not only that, as when we do positive reinforcement, because I've done bite sports with positive reinforcement, it's very easy to get a 95-pound Belgian Malinois to bite. It's not as easy to get said Malinois to let go. So the typical traditional trainer is going to they're going to build drive up and up and up and up, and then they're going to use something to dampen it down when they need it to dampen down. It's a positive reinforcement based trainer. We have to layer control.
Yes.
We do a little drive and we layer control. And so, part of even Geo-Scenting, when I see those dogs, is working with a client and saying, okay, this is what you have. You have a Ferrari. Now let me show you how to downshift. It's not about hitting the brakes. Because if you hit the brakes, you're going to burn them out. If you're constantly hitting the brakes, you need to be able to learn to downshift. There's a finesse that's involved in all of that. So layering control is huge, and so that's that's also part of it for those dogs. For dogs
do you find that families then understand the correlation between, like, okay, we're doing that in this activity about finding scent, and how that dog is interacting, say, with the neighbor's dog, or going on a walk, or with the family's children?
There can be. If you'll notice, if you've ever seen some of Karen's stuff, like on Kinsey and stuff like that, you'll see her like she's just done something on a dopamine box. You saw the position specific marker stuff that's so big now, multiple markers. All of that stuff came from the bite sport world.
Yeah.
What Karen has done, in fact, this was hilarious. Years ago, I've got a group of decoys and bite sport people out in our back pasture. Back when we were in Texas, we're in Memphis now. Karen was teaching a reactive dog class in our training studio. I was out in the back teaching dogs how to bite. And it was so funny because we were using gunfire at one point, and a sheriff's deputy pulls up, and she gets out of her car and walks back there. And what's going on? Oh, we're doing bite sport stuff. And my wife and like her students had finished their stuff, and they all put their dogs in their crates, and my wife and her students walked out, and one of her students said, yeah, his wife is in here teaching our dogs not to bite, and he's back here teaching our dogs to bite. So Karen figured out that aggression is aggression is aggression, even if it's done in without, if it's done in prey without actually, having the dog become civil where it's biting for real, it's still, all that stuff ties in together.
Yeah.
And she was telling me something last night, and I cannot remember the woman's name because I'm a husband and I don't listen to my wife the way I should. But anyway, she was telling me, she was telling me about somebody last night that was discussing this very thing, and about drive and stress, and I've always looked at it as drive and stress just being on, de-stress and drive, or even overdrive being on the same plane, because it has to do with chemicals being released in the brain and stuff like that. And she was explaining something that I've got to get with her when she gets back from Texas, because it was actually kind of blowing a hole a little bit in some of my thought processes.
Oh.
So I've got to revisit some stuff. So that's one of the things that probably going forward in some of the seminars and workshops that I do, I'm going to have some brand new information. So I'm really excited about that. But anyway, it all correlates though. That's why she's been able to take this stuff and work it into reactivity, into aggression, and all realms of behavior, because behavior is behavior is behavior.
Yes.
It all correlates.
Yes. And I think sometimes, so I'll interrelate it to foster parenting. So I had a foster son who was sweet as pie. I adore him. He was 7 at the time.
Yeah.
And he would throw, completely understandably, he would throw a temper tantrum that was impressive. Like, I was genuinely afraid that he was going to injure himself. Right?
Oh, wow.
He would throw temper tantrums where he was like pounding the floor and kicking the floor and banging the floor with his head hard enough that he was going to have bruises.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, well, I can't just be like, stop feeling how you're feeling. Like, that's not really, like, once it's gotten to that point, he needs an outlet. Right.
Sure.
So I went and got really thick stall mats that were like resilient.
Right.
And we just made a temper tantrum mat. And he decorated it. And it slid between the counter and like my cabinetry and the fridge. And he had my permission at any time. He could pull out his mat and throw it down and absolutely pitch a fit. And I would not harsh his mellow at all.
Wow. I need to do that for me. That sounds great.
So that ended. I think he maybe used the mat 10 times, maybe. We found that because we were accepting of the behavior, we said, I understand you have really big feelings right now, and you really don't have the tools to know how to deal with them.
Right.
And this is not the moment for me to try to, like when the volcano's erupting is not the time to try to direct the lava.
Sure.
Here is a safe way for you to feel all your feels and do what works for you. And then we can talk through it and fix it. And it was huge. And so I love that you're talking about this idea of a dog who's using their mouth in a way that the average family says this is beyond the pale, that there could be a way to redirect that behavior to here, go beat up your flirt pole.
Yeah.
Instead of me, or some other redirection of,
or do something that
or
takes
your
the drive,
really
and
hard.
it almost makes the dog work within a certain plane. Something I've always said, and my wife gets so tickled when she hears me say it. I say, dogs and men think alike. We're very single-minded, single-focused. So when we get into that point, it's like when your dog is sniffing around you have
Let them
trouble
sniff.
getting their attention, because that part of their brain is huge. It's less than 1.5%, I think, of a human's brain, and it's over 30% of a canine brain deals with olfactory. It's a huge part of their brain. So, being able to take a dog that's got this erratic behavior up here and get them to do an activity where it's calm and it's focused. And then the cool part about it is even getting that dog into that, they learn also that you're part of that game.
Right.
That's where, I'm a nose work judge, a scent work judge within ACSW. And I do a seminar for that I do on scent work that has to do with the first 25 seconds, because that's where everybody loses the ribbon, is the first 25 seconds. Everybody thinks that I say, well, what was your strategy? I'll talk to people, after the trial's over, the trial weekend, and they'll say, well, I was just, I'm following my dog, or I start downwind and let my dog, go somewhere else, and then I just change and I start following my dog. Nobody has a strategy to send their dog somewhere to start. And it's so simple to do that. Um, if you can save, 16 to 25 seconds at the very beginning on every search that you go on, every trial run you take, those are ribbons. That's the money ribbons. And I've seen dogs, you hear the thing about um, slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Yeah.
That term, that's that's what I'm talking about. And being able to
So
even assess the room when you walk in.
I'm gonna ask a question because
Mhm.
I don't compete in scent work. So are
Yeah.
you talking about kind of almost like casting the dog so that because we do have to follow our dogs
Mhm.
within reason,
Right.
like not off a cliff, um, but maybe to the edge. So are you talking about like casting the dog and saying to the dog, okay, here's the exercise we're doing at the very beginning. We're gonna cast you. We're gonna take a little mini tour and you're gonna tell me, yes, the scent is in that direction or this
Well,
direction.
it's not even that. I mean, sometimes that happens. Like but it's that happens more in an outdoor setting. When you're
Right.
going into a room, you just walk in a door and you've got about 25 seconds to figure out how you're going to search that room. So I'm gonna, and this is kind of getting off of the Geo-Scenting deal, but it all pertains though, because scent propagation in a room is actually much harder than outside.
Right.
It's little micro changes all around the room. So when I go in that first 25 seconds, I'm going to assess things like AC
How's the
vents,
air
things like
moving?
heat on the windows, things like surface
Ah,
construction. Is it wood? Is it plastic? Is this carpet? Is it tile? I'm looking at all these different things. How close are objects in the room to my start? And I'm just running this through my mental faculty as quick as I can, and then I'll base on where I'm going to send that dog to begin with. And there's still a little bit of a crapshoot. You're still trying to, you're trying to kind of outsmart the coordinator that set up the search. There's still a little bit of a crapshoot going on, but if you understand propagation and you understand how all those other things affect odor, you're going to be right more than you're going to be wrong. And worst case scenario is maybe that day you don't get first, second, or third, but you just qualify. But most of the time, if you do that, and if you really have a sound strategy together on how you're going to work your dog at the moment that you cross that line, you're going to be in the money most of the time. And so
love that.
that's
So
kind of what I teach.
so I would tell you the same thing happens like in my pet dog classes for like just life manners, right? That
Mm-hmm.
we're working. I organize them, right? This is the activity we're doing, blah, blah, blah,
Sure,
right?
sure.
The moment they walk out of my gate, they have no plan. None.
Mm-hmm.
And it honestly, I think that is what guts every single pet dog trainer
I
that
think
we
the
just
problem,
try.
I think the
It's
problem
so
that you're
funny.
talking about is they have all these tools, but
They don't know when to
they
use
don't put the gameplay. Yeah, it's when to do it. If I watch a young trainer, we had a girl that worked for us. Um, uh, we broke, of course, all the child labor laws at the time. She was homeschooled, but we worked it out. She was like 11 years old, and she came. She and her brother wanted to learn about dog training, and I did it as a favor just to let her come to our place in Texas. And I told Karen as soon as I said yes, I said that was the dumbest thing I've ever done because Karen's working with a lot of aggression cases. The last
right.
thing I wanted was an 11 and a 13-year-old on the property. So I said, she said that I could even put her to work. So I'm going to have them pick up poop that first day and we'll run them off. And we had about I don't know, we probably had about 40 dogs in the kennel at that time. So there was a lot of dog poop. And I look out there and these kids are laughing, swinging their buckets, having the best time in the world picking up dog poop. She worked for me for the next 9 years, until she was past old enough to really work for me. And she ended up becoming a trainer. And it was so cool me watching her develop early on when she had all the tools but she didn't know how to use them. That was the funnest part because that's when I saw her going, "Oh, wow. Oh,
Oh,
that's
I
when
can
I
do
do
this.
that. Oh, I
Yeah.
can do this." And then she started coming to us and saying, "I have an idea." I'll give you a simple example. Doing a hand target with a dog, having them touch open palms. She goes, "Bob, they couldn't do it." So what I started doing was putting 2 fingers on the back of my hand and they could touch that. She came up with that. She told me, that was the proudest moment of my life, when she came up with that. Now, did she develop it? I don't know, but she got online, maybe saw somebody else do it. I don't
Right.
know. Bottom line is she told me, do it like this instead of like this.
Well, and
And
I
and
think this
and
is part of
that
where
was cool.
if you're a compulsion based trainer, positive reinforcement based trainers don't even want to talk to you because, we've become so dogmatic in the industry and it's an error.
It is
Like,
an error. I'll work and talk to
I'll
anybody.
talk to anybody. I'll
I've
talk to
I've
anybody.
taught a ton of seminars where I'm the only positive reinforcement based trainer there. And I'll even watch somebody use an e-collar and I'll say, "Can I make a suggestion on the way you're using your e-collar?" Because
Oh,
I
well, I
used to
don't do
do
that
that
because I
before.
don't do it.
Oh,
But
well, I'll make that suggestion because I'll see them making a mistake and I'll see the dog really confused. And I say, "Well, I'm not going to be able to get you to change, but maybe I can get you to do that in a clearer way so it's better for your dog." That's not
well,
my favorite way, but in 3 days, sometimes that's the best I can do, you
and
know?
I'm not going to make an argument that that stuff needs to happen in the hands of the average dog owner, right? I'm not
Yeah,
going to make that
yeah.
argument.
Oh, no, 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 no. Yeah,
But the more that we can be clear, regardless of which methodology we're utilizing, the better. And the
exactly.
more that we're doing that straight ethology of, okay, the dog isn't learning what I think I'm trying to teach the way I'm trying to teach it. So I might need to stop, go
Mhm.
back to the drawing board, really think about what could I adjust that may help the dog
Yeah.
and then come back to it. And my experience is that the dogs process during the break. Like they're
Mhm.
gathering data while we're working with them. And we say, that'll do, take a break. They sit there going, what in the world was this crazy human trying to get across? Because
Right,
obviously I'm
right,
missing the mark. And when you come back, don't change. I tell this to people all the time. Don't make the change.
right.
See, with that first repetition, did the dog make the leap in learning on their own? Because when we change what we're doing, that very first next repetition, I think we often steal the dog's confidence because they were doing work on that even when we weren't, and they were
Exactly.
trying to meet us. And if we keep adjusting what we're doing, then we're like dancing to a different tune. And they're like, I finally figured out the last dance step.
Yeah.
Why are you
Yeah.
changing it again?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if
Yeah.
they didn't process it, then I might go, okay, here, dog, we're going to try something different. We're going to try this thing in a different pair of pants. But I try to make that really,
Well,
really
and
clear.
and one of the things I'm going to get a little bit sciencey on this still. Um, One of the things that I see quite a bit is, have you ever done any of the chicken workshops with Bob Bailey?
No, I
Okay.
haven't.
I've done
I
3 or
wish I
4 of
had.
them. It probably did more for my dog training than anything I've ever done. Because one of the things that it made me do was really observe. And another concept that he talked about, and this is a deal that I ask a lot of people that they've never even heard this, but um, when you're looking um, at working with a dog or any animal, and that dog is making a series of mistakes, and it's reinforcing, correcting that. And when I say correction, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not
Well,
talking about punishment based
supporting
stuff,
the dog.
but yeah, supporting the dog. When I start to correct that, I have to remember that my reinforcement doesn't weigh as much as the reinforcement that the dog gave
Right.
himself. Okay, so just I always like to use like a scale of justice, and you have marbles in it, and the dog's marbles are in this side, and your marbles are in this side. And Bob Bailey always says, anytime you're training, that Murphy is always on your shoulder. Murphy's law. Well, he's kind of on the shoulder with the dog's marbles, and so even though they're the same size marbles, these maybe
One's made
weigh
of lead
100
and one's
pounds
made of
each.
plastic.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like this all the time. So instead of doing, if the dog's reinforced himself 100 times, it ain't doing it 101 times to change it. It may be
Right.
doing it 10,001 times to change it. And it's called matching law.
And it's just like,
And
right? The
yeah,
child that's learning how to launch his bike off the jump
right,
into the trampoline,
right.
right? That our mom and dad brains go berserk. They're or even the teenager who sneaks out and goes to the party and then gets corrected, whatever that's going to be when they get home. We did
Mm,
not steal the fun.
yeah, yeah.
So I love that this law of matching, like all of it, it's about how learning happens pretty much regardless of species, in my experience.
Well,
Now, whether you're
and
predator, prey, whatever
right.
matters.
One of the other concepts that a lot of people don't think about, I'll ask somebody what impulse control is, and they answer that they. In fact, I made the mistake before I really understood the difference in impulse control and self control. Is Karen and I were teaching a seminar together, and we can't really do that anymore because usually like I was in 3 time zones just recently, and I came home for 2 or 3 days and she left, and that's kind of what our life is like. So, but back when we used to teach seminars together, it was so much fun. But I made the mistake one time of asking a question about something that I really didn't know the answer to. I mean, I was curious. I wanted to get feedback from my
Right.
students. And I said, what is impulse control? We got off topic for like a half a day. And Karen was ready to kill me that night. I never will forget. She goes, what were you doing? I said, boy, that was interesting. So I went to a bunch of human psychologist type people and to understand this concept. And self-control requires impulse control. Self-control, though, is a thought process that considers emotions coming up with a game plan to correct behavior, human behavior. Where impulse control is more of an emotional thing, and it kind of happens on the fly. Um, some people that have better impulse control uh, maybe have a filter in the way they talk. It's already in place. They figured out maybe after one time that maybe you don't say everything you think. Okay. Maybe, you hold back a little bit. You're laughing, my wife. So, so,
So
uh,
one of the things that I don't like in about your
yeah,
wife is that she says everything she thinks, but
he
she's
says
careful about
everything.
where and when,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So she's
yeah,
like,
and
okay, I need you to come over here with me behind this shrubbery where I
yeah,
need to say what I think.
and it pretty much comes out. So it took me a while to realize that I'm okay, just get used to it. So that's kind of the way it is. But I also used to be one of those people that it just came out.
Right.
I just I reveled in shock value, and I just don't do that anymore, And but it also took me realizing where the crowd that I was in, that it was not considered as appropriate behavior. And I was
Right.
being shunned a little bit. So the emotion made me start to pay attention to what I was saying and stuff like that. Where a dog is concerned or an animal is concerned, dogs don't really have great impulse control. A lot of times, the impulse control comes into place by environmental punishment, classical conditioning.
Yes, Dobie learned that he could not, my Doberman learned
Mhm.
that he could not run around the backyard looking over his shoulder because trees don't move.
Bingo. That's a prime example right there. And it can be dramatic if the dog, say, isn't born with really solid nerve strength. When that happens, it may be the entire backyard that's poisoned. So
Thank
that's one
goodness
of those
he
things. Yeah,
realizes it's just an oak tree.
yeah. That's one of those things. Where like my wife spends a lot of time modifying the emotional response of an animal, so that they're able to replace a behavior that's not acceptable with a behavior that is acceptable. And so that's kind of one of those things that we look at, when we consider impulse control. Dogs can't do self control. A dog can't say, "Oh, I bit someone, and I got punished for it. So I think that, and I know that it wasn't the person that punished me. The punishment really came from dad. So I'm not going to do that again. And the next time I see that person, I'm just going to go to my dad and rely on my dad." Doesn't work like that. That game plan is too
The game plan
outrageous.
needs to be dad saying, come over here before you get yourself into mischief.
Exactly, and being and working on behaviors that help the dog control that emotional response that led to that happening. So there
Every
may be a
single
bunch of
human cut,
tools that have to be put in place before that. Yeah.
well, and every single person who's cut toenails or is trying to work a mat out of code has said to
Hmm.
their dog, knock it off. Like
Right.
at the early stage of the dog being like, I'm going to be a fuss budget about this. And we're like, stop. You have
Hmm.
a caterpillar in your ear fringe and it has to come out. Stop it.
Hmm.
And I would say that there are a lot of like I will have the occasional quarrel with a positive reinforcement trainer. Like it's we're not supposed to I I work to reduce or eliminate if possible stress. However, that doesn't mean that that I'm permissive. Like
Sure. Sure.
they do, like children, like old ladies, I have to
Hmm.
learn that there are limits to my behavior.
Yeah.
My dog needs to learn that too. Like, I'm sorry, that is beyond the pale. We're not doing that.
Sure.
But it's not
And
after the dog did the thing, it's when the dog is thinking about the thing.
exactly. And we're like Geo-Scenting is concerned. One of the reasons why I started to figure out the effect that it was having on dogs that were doing this, say dogs that were not environmentally sound, for example, is I didn't think about the behavior. I just kept doing stuff in a positive manner until these dogs could do it. And when I brought it home to our studio in Texas, and Karen would come out and watch this, of course, Karen's always thinking about everything from the behavior aspect, and she started pointing out, "Oh my gosh, do you see what's happening?" We had a big mastiff that was terrified of life and people and everything. Wasn't aggressive. It was a flight dog. It wasn't, a fight dog. It wasn't aggressive, but it was just terrified of everything, terrified of life. By the end of I don't know, probably about 8 weeks of setting up these puzzles where the dog would come into the room and hunt for source and do stuff like have to climb up a ramp to get on top of a table. Can't tell you all the dogs I taught to counter surf, would climb on a
You're like,
ramp up on top
sorry.
of a table or go through a maze that I made up with X pins or even knock the maze over to get to source. I didn't care how they accomplished it. I just wanted them to solve the puzzle. This dog would come into a room with 15 people sitting there and not even start working until it said hello to every person in the room. It would have never done anything like that before. And Karen is having like these aha moments that came from something totally unrelated to what she did, but that's the way she works, man. She sees it and goes, "We
Yes.
can build on this."
Yes.
That's
So
probably her forte.
I would say that one of the things that I love, a long list of things I love about your wife,
Mhm.
is one, she often gives you credit for teaching her something or her observing something with you that then she like turns it on its head and flips it around and
And
finds a way
uses
to
it.
utilize it a different way.
Utilizes it for
And
other
then
other
her,
stuff. It's amazing.
yes. And it's kind of like, I always think it's akin to when like a true mathematician who just sees math differently, that
Mhm.
it's a whole nother world. And I think really excellent, that's where excellence in dog training often comes.
Mhm.
It's sad to me that so rarely is that level of skill, because it's such phenomenal skill, it tends to go to high drive sports, high drive work, and it
Right.
and where it really is magical and truly changes the world is the average living room.
Mhm.
And those level trainers are on Fenzi. They're not teaching at PetSmart,
Right.
right? So
Right.
it's they're not me, generally in a training space inside a pet store to add value to the customers of the store and to build community. Now, I have a little bit of that. Like she's shaken a little bit of her special
Uh,
fairy dust on me. And I do often think to myself, like, okay, so when I've watched bite work, how have I seen this? Like, how did they raise or lower arousal in the dog? Right. And
mhm.
is there um just pressure on the leash? Right. So
Mhm.
how is that impacting the behavior of the dog in this fight sport world? What is that signaling to the dog? And what is my, average mama, walking her Labrador retriever on the sidewalk with her two kids? How is her tight leash influencing behavior? And is there correlation? And so it's interesting. I
Well,
do
and
love doing that work.
one of the things that I've seen, and I apply this to like all of my clients, is what we were talking about earlier, where there's so many tools, and that knowing how to apply the tools. I am huge. I tell my clients, videotape, 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 videotape. When I teach a seminar, I'll if people don't know how to do it, I'll show them how to upload to YouTube, how to send me the link. I say, you can even send it to me as an unlisted link.
Right.
Nobody else will get it unless you send it to them. My nose work client, I have a class, a series that I teach called the Nose Knows. And it's both, I can teach Geo-Scenting, and then I've got another class that's competition, scent class, two different groups. Some of them are in both classes, but it's so cool now because it's hard for me now to even keep up with the videos. They post videos and include everybody in the class, and I'm sitting back watching my students coach each other.
I
And it
love
is,
it when it gets to
oh
that
my
point.
God.
Like, it's so much
I
fun.
literally, I sat there for a week, seriously, and I'm watching
And you
videos
learn
come
things.
in.
I mean, if
And
you're me,
I'm not even commenting other than to say, nice video, good job.
very
But I'm
great. Yeah.
watching them teach each other. And there was not a single thing. It was all coming out, a couple of them had some innovative ideas. They're saying, well, I had to do this a little bit. There was stuff I hadn't really taught. They just sort of figured out. There were a couple of them that were saying, okay, well, remember when Bob was talking about this, you could apply that here, and that is just, oh man, it's the coolest thing. And I've really tried to include that. Even if I do a private lesson, we'll have private lesson packages, which we really try to push. And it's not because we make more money, because actually per lesson, we make a lot less money. I mean, a lot less money than we do for a single lesson. But every now and then I'll get a client that says, I just want a single lesson. And a lot of times in the Memphis area, um, I think there's a big problem with people paying for stuff and then people not following through. And just in life,
I
and
don't think
we've
that's a
had
Memphis problem.
well, in Texas, I never had that problem. In Memphis, though,
Really?
I've been ripped off by a couple of contractors. I've got a CPA right now that's disappeared, and it's been a nightmare, one thing after another. But
So
in
sorry that's been
Texas,
your experience.
everything I did in Texas, we did a handshake. I'd cut you a check, and they came back and finished stuff. So, but it's kind of been a problem here. So people, they want to do a lot of single lessons to start. And then a lot of times they come back and say, okay, let's do a package.
Now we'll do a package. Now that
Can
I
we
know
turn
that
this
this is
into
a
a
good fit.
package? Yeah. And which is
And I
fine. And I
grandfather
don't
people
blame
when
them.
they do that.
Oh,
Like
I
I
do too.
grandfather people when we do that.
Yeah. I don't blame them for doing that. And I will certainly do the same thing. But anyway, do the single private lesson. And I'll even take time with that client at the end of the lesson and say, videotape. Have you ever done YouTube? This is how you do YouTube. This is how you send it. I'll send them a write up and I'll write that process down. In fact, it just reminded me I've got to do a write up for a lesson I did last week. But the video stuff is wonderful, and I will tell them when you start videoing. Like I've got a new puppy now that I'm videoing stuff, and with a lot of dogs here, if I'm working with a client dog and the session goes really good that I videotape, I don't even save it. I'll just delete it and then I video again the next session. There's no reason for me to watch it if the session went good. If I had something during that session where it either didn't go good or I had to what I call change on the fly, which is kind of a Bob Bailey thing. If it ain't working, do something different. If I have to do that during the session, I'll go back and I'll really analyze everything. Did it not go good to begin with because I was using poor mechanics? Did it not go good to begin with because maybe it was a timing issue, which would be mechanics? But did it not go good to begin with and I was slow to pick it up? Why did I have to change? Or was that change really necessary and fruitful? And that's what I look for. And then, of course, when a session doesn't go good, I want to see, okay, what happened?
Bob Dietz has so much knowledge and so many interesting stories that our conversation just kept going on and on. So we're going to end today's episode and we'll pick it up again next week. Be sure you join us, and thank you so much for spending your precious time with us.